So I'm just putting. Okay, so look, I would like to welcome you heartily to this book launch of my book, Secrets and Lives, The Shocking Truth of Recent Aboriginal History in Australia, and it's also a memoir. So I'm going to hand over, yes, Norman's reaching for it. And yeah, you can hold it up. So I'm handing over to Norman now because he wrote the foreword for it. Over to Norman.
Well, what an honour to launch Barbara's wonderful book, Secrets and Lies, and to have each one of you worldwide on this Zoom here this morning in Australia's time, but for many of you, I know it's in the evening or early hours of the morning as well. So the foreword, this explosive book is a gripping read that you will not be able to put it down. It tells the hidden history of First Nations people in Australia, and particularly in Queensland, her home state. However, it also touches of the internationalization of the struggle for justice of the First Nations people. The personal and political are interwoven in this book, which are a memoir and a history at the same time. Barbara is a walking, talking history, mainly because she has lived through and has been closely involved with many ups and downs in Aboriginal affairs. I believe this book is groundbreaking and history making, and it honours many of the First Nations people of Australia whose stories need to be told. This book is a treasured book that must be read. So thank you and congratulations, Barbara.
So thank you so much, Norman. I'm just only going to share briefly, and then we have some wonderful people who are going to be sharing today. And look, I'd like to say this is a memoir as well. So I'll tell you a little bit about how I got to be involved with such awesome Aboriginal people that I write about in the book, whose stories have just touched my heart so much. It's also a history as well. And I really believe that that history needed to be told. And the stories of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that I've just been privileged to have worked with or been friends with over the years are such rich, incredible stories. The world needs to know about it. So I'm privileged to be able to showcase their voices in the book. And so what I want to just say is, how did I get here to do that? In 1970, a long time ago now, I was a student at Queensland University in Brisbane and got involved with a Christian group called Revitalisation of Christianity, or ROC, and they had a very strong social justice focus, and I picked that focus up really strongly as well. So that's how I got started, and there were people like Dennis Walker and Cheryl Buchanan and Sam Watson Jr. and Senior and Len Watson, and many of those that I was involved with at that time, and later at the Tent Embassy in Canberra. Then I got involved with a group in Melbourne called IDA, and they were also a Christian group focused on social action and research. And it was through them that I met Burnham, or Harry Penrith, bless his soul, and was asked to come up to North Queensland and work on what was then called the White Colonialism in Australia project. And it turned out to be the Mapoon project, helping the Mapoon people move back to their land that they'd been moved off by force 11 years earlier at gunpoint by the Queensland government for mining, which actually never took place on their land. And the people just really hungered to go back to their land, and I was privileged to help them do that, along with the team of Mick Miller in Cairns, an Aboriginal school teacher that I was billeted with, him and his family, and the IDA and others. So 6 months later, we had them back on their land, and that story is told in White Woman, Black Heart, Journey Home to Old Marpoona memoir. And so then I actually didn't write about that until 2018, and I had about 50,000 words that I pulled out of that because it was too long, and I thought I'd never get round to finishing it. But you know, as what happened is I was very instrumental with the helping set up the North Queensland Land Council, and many of the things I talk about in my book were the work of the Land Council that I was research officer for, press officer, North Queensland message stick editor, come campaigner. I ended up marrying Mick. We were together for 13 years. After we split up, I married Norman. We've been together for 30 years now, and an awesome team, I believe. So for a while, I was the CEO of the Aboriginal Coordinating Council, worked on a submission on Aboriginal deaths in custody. It was a very high level advocacy role, representing the local government communities in Queensland, and so submissions to government on land and resource legislation, etc. And so that's a little bit of my background. And then so round about November last year, I had a dream of an elder in Arakoon that I knew very well, and I knew he'd passed on. And then the scene changed to his granddaughter or great-granddaughter, I'm not sure. And she showed me a mobile phone and she said, "This is your story. You need to tell it." And when I woke up, I thought the first couple of chapters that I had pulled out of the book and not used were on Arakoon and Mornington Island. And the people, the leaders, had just such strength of character and were just, you know, they just live in my memory so strongly. Their faces, their names, their stories, what they went through to protect their community from the Queensland government, who wanted to take over the community. And so that story really needed to be told. The Queensland government, basically under Bjelke Petersen, ran Queensland Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander reserves, very much like South African apartheid under the Queensland Act. And most of that story I talk about in my book, The Dying Days of Segregation, case study, Yarrabah, with the voices of the Yarrabah people. And the Mayor of Yarrabah, Ross Andrews, was meant to come on. I'm hoping he still will. But so it covers a little bit of that Yarrabah story, including their award wages story. And with regard to Palm Island, it covers the 1957 strike against, it wasn't just for wages, it was a penal colony that the Queensland government sent Aboriginal people that they thought were troublemakers. They sent to that community, and it was very draconian conditions there. And so there was a strike, and I was able to go to the 60th anniversary of that. And also I talk about the story of the death at police hands of Mullaringi, a young Aboriginal man there. And Lex Watton will tell you more, because he led what was called a riot in response to the police handling of it, which was a cover-up. And you know, it's and he went to jail for it. But I won't spoil his story, because it's such an important one. But I will say that you know, with all the Black Lives Matter discussions, protests, etc., around the world, you know, we have a situation in Australia where you know, it's such a big concern about Indigenous deaths in custody, even though the statistics show that it's no greater than non-Indigenous deaths in custody. The incredibly high rate of Indigenous carceration is a big issue. And also the fact that no Aboriginal person who's died at the hands of police in custody has ever been successfully convicted, which is a real issue as well. It's an ongoing issue in Australia. So look, I'll cut a long story short. I had a lot that I wanted to say, but I also want to hear from other people as well. And obviously I hope that if you don't already have my book, that you will get it. It's available from my website and from Amazon, but you can get the link from my website, which is www.barbara-miller-books.com. But some of the issues that are brought up in the book are still with us today, but there has also been great progress as well. And it covers the right up to present day, with the boomerang petition that Norman has successfully gathered signatures for over the years and presented to Parliament for recognition of Indigenous people in the Constitution and removal of racism from it. And also the current issues of Voice Treaty Truth right up to the present day are all covered in the book. And also, while there's been a lot of progress, we have the huge issue of closing the gap still, of bringing equity between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people with regard to health, education, income, housing, and as I said, incarceration rates and many other issues. So I want to leave that with you. And, you know, at the end, if you want to ask me questions, that's fine as well. But I'd also like to hear from some of the other people who've come on at this point. And later on, we have a wonderful video from a South African author for you, which David Jack will put up for me. So right now, we'll go to Lex Watton from Palm Island. Over to
Hello.
you, Lex.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Hi, Lex.
Yeah, can everyone
Alex.
hear me?
Yes, I
Can everyone hear me? Yeah, yeah. Just because this is the first time I've ever done Zoom, so yeah, I'm sort of pretty new to it. But anyway, I suppose in trying to assist and sum up what Barbara said, yeah, I've met Barbara some years ago now, and due to, I think I went to a funeral, as Barbara stated, her late husband before Norman, Mick Miller, who's actually first cousins to my wife, Cecilia Sibley, who is actually named after Mick's mother, Cecilia. So And I think we met at the funeral for Mick then some time ago. And then we become Facebook friends and stuff like that. But back in 2004, 17 years ago now, November, 19th of November, as Barbara stated, there was a death at the hands of the sergeant of police here. And upon hearing that, I knew that there would be a cover-up of this particular death. And overall, there were 3 inquests into the actual death in a period of 4 years to get to the bottom of what really happened. And but overall, there was, from my point of view, the state also tried to cover up in conjunction with the state police. And but at the end of the day, the police officer was actually ended up being charged on Australia Day, which is the 26th of January, for those who aren't familiar with Australia, which is Australia Day. And so that was 2 years after the actual death. And then I think it took another 2 years before he actually fronted court, or just a year and a bit after, before he went to court, and then he was acquitted of the manslaughter. And then, but during that, we had the whole state police force backing this particular case and wanting it all dismissed and stuff like that. And so they discredited the local witnesses during the inquest into the death in custody itself to prevent any evidence coming forward. So there was a cover up in all forms, I suppose. And then, and at the same time, I was going through the legal process and trying to get my particular case delayed to see what would be the outcome of the police officer, which we all knew would be the result that he would be acquitted. And then it would look very unfair on my particular case if I went to court and then was, because I ended up facing 2 life terms imprisonment. At first, there were 9 particular charges all up. And then because during the committal proceedings into the so-called Palm Island riot, there was no actual physical evidence to tie me to anything other than a few words that I said on video, which then in some sense relates to what happened later after those few words. And then, but there was the comment from myself saying that the police station government building would be, and so the police station ended up on fire. And but at the end of the day, there was no evidence to tie me to any of that. But because I had an all-white jury, I even had to fight to get my particular case taken from the District of Townsville, which is not my district, on Palm Island, but because they don't allow jury of your peers in our Indigenous communities, we have to go and face court on the mainland where, you know, possibly, well, it's always an all-white jury, as I've learned during the stages, that they pick a jury pool within so many kilometers from the courthouse. So, and then it's difficult to get Indigenous people without any criminal history or record to sit on a jury. So there was a lot of things, I suppose, over the years that I learned, and how they, the system that we live under, which is very racist in all its form, prevents us from equality in this particular country. So, but yeah, I could talk about a lot of things, I suppose, but so it ended up that, yeah, I had to get the case removed out of Townsville, which I had to go through legally, and I was successful my second attempt to get that out of Townsville to Brisbane. It would have been better if I went interstate, and I would have actually had to probably walked and got off, but I sort of gave the state the opportunity to see if it's the system is fair. And so overall, if you could just imagine sitting in the courtroom and then all the police evidence being destroyed by my legal team, and then a jury still comes back, you know, and then actually see, while the evidence being destroyed by way of their evidence that were conflicting, or they just couldn't prove anything. And then I'm sitting there watching jury members, you know, actually with smirks on their face, seeing that their lives are being destroyed, and that, you know, then at the end of the day, jury comes back with a guilty verdict. But then I prepared myself for things beforehand when the state wanted to settle the matter and asked me if I wanted to plead guilty, and then stop all the other things by way of thing, and then they'd let me do nothing under 9 years and nothing over 13 years. And so I said no to that, and said we'll go continue the fight. And then if what they needed to really understand was there's 19 actual communities in our particular state, and that they needed to understand that the state of Australia is watching, the whole country is watching this particular case, and that they could have something similar to the Los Angeles riot in this country if I was convicted, you know, and stuff like that. So so it's not, it wasn't a threat. It's something that they could consider, and that that's the possibility that could happen. So, and if they wanted me to accept any guilty plea, that I'll take responsibility for my actions, and that I would do no more than 2 years, so 6 months to 2 years. And overall, whether they took that into consideration coming, then when I was found guilty, the judge ended up giving me 7 years, and he took a year off and said, you can do 6, but I'll take 12 months off for that. So ended up 4 years, and he said, you can do 2 years and I'll take 110 days. So I ended up actually doing 20 months of imprisonment. And so, yeah, that's that particular story. And then I did that, come out, and got back to my community, started working. I've been working since then up until April, because I got injured at work, and I've been just at a home on work cover at the moment, and we'll return to work in February next year. But the flow on from while I was in prison, I actually took the state then for a discrimination case, and was successful with $30 million for the whole community. So I took a case and as the lead applicant, and myself, my mum, and Cecilia, my wife, and it was on behalf of 2,000 people, but only 447 people lodged a claim with the lawyers, and so we ended up with a $30 million settlement with the state, yeah, so that's about a year and a bit since they've been paid, and at the moment, Channel 9 made a racist report on how people spent their monies, and we got a claim against Channel 9, and so that's proceeding in the court sometime soon. And because of COVID, the lawyers couldn't get up to sign up more members, and it's only open to the 447 members that claimed. There are a few that have passed on since before they even received their money, but family members received it from what I was told. But yeah, it's been a bit of a struggle. Of there's a lot more to around the case itself with the thing, but even at my particular trial, one of the interesting thing was the police officer who was supposed to investigate the officer at the center of the death in custody actually admitted in my trial that his investigation into the officer wasn't truthful and honest. And so I was always talking about, well, is there an opportunity, trying to think of the word, for them to retry and double jeopardy, the word is, and get him back in the courts, and then get this officer to admit that, because when some 6 months before the actual death, he investigated the same officer for running over the feet of the deceased niece. He ran over her foot with a vehicle, and so all of this thing, it's related. There are books that being written on this particular case, which is called, one of the books is called Palm Island Through a Long Lens, which is a lady by the name of Joanne Watson. And there's another book called Tall Man, which is, the author is Chloe Hooper, and there's an actual documentary, which is, I recommend you search it up and have a look, and then you'll see relating to the that particular story and the cover up and thing. There is another book called what is it? Palm Island. Anyway, it's a book by the author is Jeff Waters. Gone for a Song. Sorry. So yeah, if you are interested in looking at that particular story, but and thing, and that's there's so much I can talk about with my particular case and the struggle and stuff like that. But then just on our particular community, Palm Island is pretty much the largest Indigenous community in the whole of the country. At any given time, at this particular time, coming up to Christmas, the numbers would thing, because we got families that transit back to the community by way of ferry, airlines, and stuff like that. And she swelled to around about 4,000 to 4,500 people. And So she's, as Barbara said, these communities were set up as penal colonies, and Palm was made up of 40 different tribes from throughout the state and even into the Northern Territory, have been sent here to Palms and left to their own devices under the rule of the state government through what you would call, they used to call them mission managers then. From then, Palm developed back in 1918. It was first used as a reserve. Back in 1904, it was gazetted as a Aboriginal reserve. So, but it wasn't settled until 1990, as Barbara said. I think she come over. Oh, that was the strike of 57, sorry. But yeah, there were a number of things that have happened. And as Barbara stated, back in 57 was the 7 men led a strike for wages and living conditions and stuff like that. And then what happened in 2007, 4, sorry, was the particular so-called Palm Island riot, and well, the riot was a week after the actual death in custody. So, and my particular story lasted for 14 years with all the court cases and stuff, but it's now continued. So, so it's been 17 years since then. But look, I recommend you have a look at those books, read up on the history. I'll leave details if you want to catch up with me in any way. I suppose I'll because it's being recorded now, I suppose I can leave me email, Lex, lex.wotton, WOTTON 67 @gmail.com if you want to catch up. My phone number is 0499 789 008 to discuss any more. I got a lot of documents. I got, if you just want to know a bit more about this community or my particular story, it hasn't been documented yet, my story. I need to do that somehow, some way, so that I could leave some type of written history, I suppose, you know, going through courts and just everyday things, just going to towns, for instance, and seeing people and they know who you are, where before that, you know, you were just another black person. But to actually have people come up to you and tell you, you know, non-Indigenous white people come up and say, you know, what you did was a good thing. And I've even had ministers come visit me in jail, you know, federal, state. Just so many things to my particular story where, you know, just the struggle, just being in jail and then authorities having a go at you and wanting you to break, and then you're just using their own corrective services acts against them and telling them that, you know.
So you've been a very strong person, Lex, haven't you? And you've been a wonderful leader for your people, and you know, we look forward to all that you're going to continue to do in the future.
Yes, like, well, just lastly, one of the things is, you know, upon being released and conditions that I had to live under for the 4 years under parole, I couldn't even go to a meeting in my own community, in my own backyard. I couldn't, I was on curfews. I couldn't leave the island without notifying 48 hours beforehand the parole office, which is pretty standard, I think. But I couldn't talk to media, and then why was I ever interested in doing that anyway? Because I needed to I've already said what I needed to say. Everything was already thing. But then I actually did go and take the state through legal process to the highest courts to get the gag order that I was put under removed. But overall, you could say that I was an actual political prisoner, which they don't want to say, but and I suppose I was the very first and only political prisoner in this country. So yeah, there's a lot to it that I'll sort of leave it there. And if yeah.
Well, it's just been absolutely wonderful to hear your story, and particularly this is the first time you've been on Zoom, so we're just very privileged to hear you and to hear your story. So thank you so much, Lex, much appreciated. I'm going to go on to Tony Crofts now from England, because it's about 1:30 in the morning. So we better get to you next. And so I just wanted to say, Tony, tell us a little bit about editing books generally, and what might have been a little bit different from my book that you edited.
Yeah, well, generally, you because you're authors, you will know that there is about 4 types of editing, and I do 2 of them, which is line editing and copy editing. The difference being, copy editing, I will tell you about the sentences as I've got wrong or something like that, whereas just line editing is just pure get the English right. What yours was different from, because I've done several memoirs, is the way it was 2 stories interlinked, really. It was your personal story and the story of Queensland. And what you managed to do was to do one timeline of a story from a political point of view, and then you go back over the same timeline virtually, or even before it, of your personal story. And then with the 2 of them, it mixed in beautifully, and it went as a story written as it was in current time. So it's not like we're looking back in history where it's all dry and facts and figures. It's actually reading like we're there. That was a bit different, and very interesting to do as well. And I'm glad you chose somebody outside of Australia, because I think some of that, what you've put in there, might have got censored anyway. I don't know. There's a lot of bias, by the sound of it, over there, far more than I would realise. And I've talked to 1 or 2 people that have been to there, and they said how bad it is, or was, because about 80s it was over there, and it's terrible. But you've had a long story.
How did you engage with the subject matter of the book?
It was like reading a sort of, how can I put it? It's almost like a thriller story. You're wondering what's going to happen next. So, but the thing is, it was real, and you think, was it real? I mean, because it's a story that's sort of half unbelievable, really. So yes, I got very interested. Because of being a copy editor, what I had to do was fact check. And that meant looking up all these people, the places and everything, to make sure you'd got everything right as far as I could check. And most of it you had. There's 1 or 2 things I managed to get up. But yeah, it was certainly different. Let's say.
So is there anything else that you'd like to say about the book as the editor?
Well, it started out as, can you check, I think it was 87,000 words, right? And then it suddenly added on a couple of thousand more. And well, I better give you it back a little bit, I'll do a little bit and then see how we're going with that, because what I don't want to do is edit it in a way you didn't like. So I just did a bit and then give it back check it through, and then we'll carry on from there. And then when it come back, it was another 6,000 words bigger. So it kept growing and growing. But we got it there. Yeah, it was very interesting to do. Thank you very much. Thanks for letting me do it. Yeah, it was really good. Let me just see. I've got lots of notes down there. I can just see it with my glasses on the room. Yeah, it's oh yeah, you asked about the interplay of history and personal thing. I think you linked it very well. Yeah, but yeah, I'm I don't know. They say usually when they talk about editing, it's very often to do with novels and things like that, not so much memoirs. And they say, oh, when you write a book, it can take a few months, but if you go through it as an editor properly, following all the stories and all the checking everything, it can very often take as long to edit the book as it does to write it. I know you started it 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm glad it didn't take 5 years to edit it. I know you've done it on and off over 5 years and got all the facts and figures coming in over this period of time, all your research. But yes, it was quite, yeah. You can only go through a book 2 or 3 times. I went through it about 4 or 5. Because after that period, you sort of get acclimatized to what's there and you don't see the mistakes or anything, or what I'm supposed to be looking for to check it right for you. So, but yeah, once I'd even finished the whole thing, I read all through it yet again, because it was just unbelievable to me, but this far away. Thanks for letting me.
Well, I can just say that you're an amazing editor, and you were so thorough that I can highly recommend you. Awesome job that you did, and so good of you to come on the book launch by Zoom as well. And thank you so much for that. But I'm so that Batul put me onto you, and I have thanked her for that. And yes, if I write another book, I'll be in touch with you. So thank you.
If I'm still around, yeah.
Thank you so much, Tony.
Okay, so, well, I'm going to stick around for a bit because I want to listen to this other stories as well.
Okay, lovely. So look, what I'm going to ask now, I have made David Jack co-host. I'll ask David to speak later, but David, would you be able to put up Monica's video for me? It only arrived this morning on Facebook Messenger, so I was technologically challenged to get it up on YouTube, but I managed to get it up there. And I have asked, I have made David co-host. Could you put that a lovely video up for me now, please, David? I know David is there. Hi, David. I can see you and Carol there. Lovely to see you both. Okay.
We're probably going to do a screen share from your... Oh, okay. It's come up for me now. Share screen. Okay.
Lovely. David and Carol are in Melbourne, and they are our very long-term friends. We normally stay with them when we're in Melbourne, and David has done some book covers for me, and he's worked on improving some very old photos up to scratch for quite a number of books for me.
So is that visible now? I'll start. Can you see that?
I can see you and Carol.
Well, I'll go back to share screen.
That's okay. Look, just very grateful that you're doing it for us. A very touching video. I wasn't really expecting Monica to come on. She's an author very good author in South Africa, and I have reviewed books for her. Here she is.
Monica Rubombora here from Johannesburg, South Africa. Barbara, congratulations once again on your book launch. I first came across Barbara's books about 3 years ago, and this is the third one that I'm reading. And really, The Secret and Lies, which is a shocking truth of the recent Aboriginal history, is a memoir by Barbara Miller. And I found it to be a very heartfelt and historical and personal account about Aboriginal people and their fight to preserve their ancestral lands against big mining companies and really the very rough treatment from the government. I found that very, very touching. The third book that I'm reading from Barbara. This particular one is a long read. One needs to read it very, very slowly to internalize it. But it reads like a novel. It is as if someone is sitting around a fireplace night after night and being taken back in time. What makes it special really is the deeply researched material and the detailed references from newspapers, from conferences and meetings and quotes. The reader gets an insider's view of the cultural clashes around the values of innovation and disruption and change on one hand versus security, conformity, and stability on the other. While the Western world's concept of change and disruption is desirable, knowing how each person fits into society and their roles and responsibilities in the wider community is highly valued in some of these communities. Those are some of the takeaways that I found in this book. Of course, I found some very shocking stories in the book, such as the government policies of withholding wages of the indigenous people, indigenous employees, or those that did not allow the Aboriginals to receive a formal education beyond a few years. But the author also describes how the Aboriginals were as such a powerless group who have turned anger and frustration in on themselves. But what makes this book even more fascinating for me are the deeply personal stories that Barbara has interwoven throughout the book. The reader, for example, is introduced to her immediate family and extended family, and the really strong bond that she has with them stands out so much. When you read, you get to understand also what her strong Christian foundation is, her pastoral works, the very prayerful nature of the family. All these stories are interspersed throughout the book. And there are some stories that are very personal and touching about the deaths of family members that were close to her. Through that, one gets to understand how these departed souls have shaped Barbara's life and her views on this deeply personal topic of race, of discrimination. The stories about the people and the events are described in a very, very vivid and relatable way. In the book, I got to meet her immediate family because there are photographs of that, and the way they have influenced her and how they've influenced what is written in the book. It is really a story that had to be told. I must say it's a very good book, and one that is interested, anyone who's interested in history or social studies, please go ahead and read this book. It will really be good for you. I enjoyed it so much, and I'm looking forward to book number 4. Thank you once again, Monica Rubombora, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Thanks, David and Carol. And, you know, it was very touching to receive that this morning from Monica, particularly when she's not well at the moment. So I'm very grateful for that. And she's a well-established author herself, so that makes it even more wonderful to hear those words from her. And now we're going to go to the US, and we're going to hear from Irene Charlin. And Alex, if you want to say a few words, you can as well. So over to Irene. Thank you.
So let me sit closer to the mic. I have to tell you that it was Aboriginal man who passed away many decades ago, who led us to Barbara and Norman, and it was William Cooper. Our friend then from Brisbane, Kayla, she introduced me to William Cooper book. And that's how I found Barbara, because the book was amazing. Aboriginal leader who few days after Crystal knocked understood what will happen to the Jews of Europe, and he stood up for them. One man when the rest of the world turned away. And when we were in Australia in 2016, I insisted that Kayla will put us together with Barbara. We corresponded before our trip. So when we came to two of you, I think both of us, Alex and me, we felt we were among friends who we knew always. We clicked right away. It was a meeting of the minds. We found soulmates. And for me, Norman's art and how you told us about Aboriginal symbols and Barbara books. After William Cooper, I probably read most of the books that you've written since then, including White Woman, Black Heart, your book about discovery of Australia. So through your books, you open up the world that I did not know much about. And it was amazing. And as an author myself, I learn a lot from you, and I never could master it to the same level. How could you write the ways that you touch people from all backgrounds, all educational levels, all ages, different cultures? You have this amazing, quiet conversational tone, quiet even when you talk about explosive things in your personal life, in politics in Australia, and you present it in a way that reading your book, I always feel I sit next to you, just like I see two of your lovely faces, and you tell it to me. And at the same time, this uneasy story of your personal trajectory. And at the same time, it's a global, it's a moral geography on a global level. You know, you Australian and you in normal, and your target Australian audience, and at the same time, everybody else who cares about equality and equity and righteousness. And it's amazing what you teach people who know two of you. You know, for me, two of you is always like one person, two amazing talents, and one huge heart, bigger than the world. So it's, justice shall you seek. You know, for me, two of you, that's what you do. And it's, I would say it's call to action for both of you through art and through books. And thank you for always making me feel that I want to be a better person when I read your books. And what I also wanted to say, I even wrote the English translation of this phrase that my mom used to quote. It's from German interesting poet Heinrich Heine from the 19th century. The crack that split the world went through the heart of an artist and a writer. And it's two of you. Thank you very much for being our friends and our teachers in many, many things. Thank you for your art and for your books.
Thank you so much, Irene. Did you want to share anything, Alex?
Recording in progress.
Oh, somehow
We have Greg.
we have Greg McIntyre.
Yes, Greg's just joined. We'll come to Greg shortly. He'll be a blessing as well.
Well, you know us so well, so you know that you can never be second after Irene, because just no matter what I say, I mean, Irene is Irene. Okay, but I want to talk about
Irene's
something
the
that she-
extrovert, isn't she?
Yeah, but I wanted to mention something that Irene touched upon, but I wanted to go a little bit deeper. If I close my eyes, I see Irene and me walking into your house. And after 5 minutes, I felt I knew you all my life. You're the brother and sister that I never had. And I'm not saying this lightly, because even from that very moment to the point, that we're talking right now, when I think about our deepest friends and people with who we share and who share with us all their, what's in their hearts and their minds, the you two come to mind first. And also, Irene has to show off a little bit.
Ah.
Right. This is
Платье shower.
right. This is in our
Australian
exhibit, and that's the image that is so spiritual that sometimes you just sit and you watch it. I mean, you don't need to say anything. You just watch this.
But he talks to me.
Well, she doesn't speak Russian. Okay, so and on another note is, as Barbara mentioned, Irene and I are not new to books. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of our own. But
Yes, please hold up your book. Hold up your latest book.
Barbara, it's about you and your book.
Yeah, this is the latest book about Malta and Corsica. We started a new series, Shailen's Jewish Travel Guide, and this is the one where you helped me a lot. This is about South Africa, suburbanites on safari, and then there are books on theater and other things. But
the typical Barbara, it's her event, but she talks about other people.
You with all your crazy schedules and crazy work, like, you always have the time to share and to help and to guide us, because in many aspects, you are my guru, you are my teacher, for many things that you shared. And hopefully some of the things we can share and help each other are helpful. But as I said, what a combination. Best friends and artists and like-minded people. And that's all I want to say.
Thank you so much. Look, we love the both of you so very, very much. And, as we were saying just before we started the Zoom meeting book launch, we were just we loved having you to meet you in our home, but we were so amazed that when Norman had a book award to pick up in Chicago for his artful Reef and Rainforest, that you traveled 8 hours to be there to support us. We just couldn't get over that. That was just awesome. And
well, this was a treasure for us to see you again and to share with the joy of receiving the awards, and that was just a great trip for us. So we would just jump on a plane and be in person with you now, except of the COVID, and I'm still trying to save some money to buy a plane. We need to sell our
good
books,
luck with that one. But look, just to go to the platypus there of Norman's art that you showed. How amazing that you called it Platy Charlotte.
A member of the family.
Yes, I can see that. And thank you so much for bringing up William Cooper. Amazing story of an Aboriginal Christian man from the 30s who led a protest against Kristallnacht, to the German consulate in Melbourne. And it's in America now, because it's the 6th of December, it's the anniversary of that protest march. We're actually the morning of December 7th in Australia, but where you are in the US, it's the anniversary. Isn't that awesome? So I'm glad you brought that up, because I had it on, I was planning to do that at some stage. So you've done it
I
for me.
forgot
Thank
about
you.
this date.
And actually, through what I read, and I'm of course your helper, doing is we kind of helping you to carry the torch, because one of Irene's lectures is about the
Jews
same,
and Aborigines.
you know, there's the same history, the same materials that you're talking about in your books. And I don't know if you've ever had, been on Zoom with this, but she's been lecturing throughout the country and internationally. And quite often, we are so happy that we can help to promote the same ideas of, mutual understanding and knowing the history. One of the biggest problems is people just don't know the history and they don't want to know it. And they keep
so you've got an
doing
amazing lecture series there, Irene. Look, thank you both so much. And we're going to go on to Greg McIntyre now. Greg was one of the lawyers for the very historic Mabo native title case in Australia. And so he's also one of the reviewers of my book. So Greg, would you please join us and share?
Yeah, hello Barbara and everybody else.
Hi, all the way from Perth.
Yes, I think I might just close. I've got 2 meetings open, so close one. Okay, that's better. Yes, and I had what I read in your book, of course, was telling me about things that you and I and Mick and others participated in the 1980s. So it was a fascinating read. It brought back memories to me of going with Mick down to Canberra and meeting the then Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, Clyde Holding, in the Hawke government, and being introduced to Charlie Perkins when he was the director of the Federal Department of Aboriginal Affairs. And there was the promise of Aboriginal land rights at a national level, which of course quickly dissipated and led to me then issuing the writ in Mabo in 1982, because it was clear that we weren't going to get land rights. But Mick and I spent a lot of time together trying to promote the idea of land rights through the agency of the North Queensland Land Council, and fighting against the Bjelke-Petersen government. It was in that time that the case of Kuat and Bjelke-Petersen was run, because the Bjelke-Petersen government had decided that they would block the transfer of land at Arakoon, a pastoral property at Arakoon, to the Winchinham people. And so we had to take that off to the High Court and get the High Court to rule that the Racial Discrimination Act was a valid piece of legislation under the External Affairs power. So Mick and I were working hand in hand through that, and you were with us, Barbara. I remember you coming to my birthday party when I first arrived in Canberra in 1981, you and Mick at that time. And then the numerous meetings down at that hotel that Mick was a mate of the proprietor. We'd often go down there and have lunches discussing politics and activism. And you recorded all that sort of thing in your book, which is fascinating, of course, to me as someone who participated in some of that.
Yes, it's just was an absolutely amazing time. So would you like to share a little bit more, Greg?
I was never I was always amazed at the calm way in which Mick fought very intense political fights. He was always charming, never aggressive, and that won over many people in a way which the sort of shouting at the barriers doesn't always. And so it was an interesting insight into the way in which to run a political campaign. But of course, Bjelke Petersen was completely resilient, resistant to any of that. And that really ultimately we had to go to court and get the High Court to make a decision for us in relation to land rights, and to bring governments kicking and screaming to the table. Of course, ultimately we got Paul Keating took the view that legislation was the way to go with the Native Title Act. That's probably all I can share, unless anybody wanted to ask me anything.
Okay, I'll just make a comment, then I'll see if anyone wants to ask you a question. You know, Greg was really at the coalface, really, as a lawyer in Cairns at the time, and working with the North Queensland Land Council, with Mick and Clary and Peter and myself. And his contribution to this nation has just been amazing, because that Mabo native title case absolutely changed everything. And we moved from land rights legislation to native title legislation, and the change was dramatic. And a couple of things I'd like to just mention I had in my talk that I didn't mention was that, as Greg said, the land at Arakoon, that it was actually John Kawata was the one there who was wanted that property for his people, Winchunum people, but Bjelke stopped the Aboriginal Land Fund Commission buying it for them. But because of the Kawata case, it enabled the Mabo case to be able to be run. And so many people call John Kawata the Mabo of the mainland. And the other thing was that when the Mabo case was being run, Yarrabah was looked at a possibility of running that case as well. And Percy Neal, the chairman at the time, the government got him by taking a spitting charge against him. Which he didn't do, but he confronted the store manager at the time, and the charge went through. So Yarrabah could have also been a Mabo case. And so, I mean, all those kind of things are in the book, but I just want to honour Greg for his enormous contribution there. Has anyone got a quick question for him before we move on? No? All right. Look, Greg.
Can I ask a question?
Someone does.
Yeah, this is Abraham from Malaysia. Abraham and Joy.
Lovely to see you, Abraham and Joy. Did you have a question for Greg?
Yes, I do have.
Yes.
Greg, for the, if there's one sentence or paragraph in terms of legacy for the next generation of all the great work that has been done in the land rights area, because my son is starting to be a lawyer in Tasmania, to the next generation, what would you say? All that has been done, a lot of progress has been done. What would you like the next generation to remember?
Well, to remember that in the process of colonisation, that does not and should not take away the rights which existed in the original peoples, and those original rights are properly to be respected by a common law system. And I've been to Malaysia, and we've talked about, there's a developing native title jurisprudence in Malaysia, under sufferance from the government. But in common law countries, it's very clear that the common law does and should respect its first peoples and their rights to country. Maybe your son's generation will fix one of the defects in the Mabo case, and that is that the majority decision was that the Crown could take away rights prior to the existence of the Racial Discrimination Act without any compensation. The Professor Kent McNeill from Osgoode College in Canada writes a very strong critique of that. It's clearly, in my view, inconsistent with the common law in the rest of the world. And so I don't think I'm going to get the opportunity to run that test case, but maybe in another generation or so, that will also be fixed.
Wow. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bless
Yes,
you.
thank you so much. Have we got anyone else wanting to ask a question of Greg before we move on to the next contributor?
Just Greg, who is this Mick you are talking about?
Oh, Barbara's first husband, Mick Miller. Sorry, I thought that. Yeah, so Mick Miller was a leading Aboriginal activist in North Queensland, the inaugural chair of the North Queensland Land Council, and continued in that role for more than a decade. He was always a highly respected person in his community. He was I recall being told he was the captain of his school at Charters Towers. He was a sportsman. He was a very good-looking fellow, and garnered a lot of support across the racial divide. And of course, racism in Queensland was quite rife in the 80s and continues to some extent to this day. So Mick played a very important role in developing a land council which came from the grassroots without any government funding, and was a group of activists, mostly based in Cairns and Townsville in North Queensland. But in my view, they were one of the most powerful land councils in the country, and were very progressive. They were well known at a national level and well respected.
Okay, so thank you for that, Greg. And, you know, one of the things about this book, as well as being in a sense, a political history of the struggle of Aboriginal people in all of Australia, and particularly Queensland, but there's a lot of international work in there as well that the Land Council did, and that's covered as well. It's also a memoir of me, so it really does paint a picture of Mick and all that he did, because later on I married Norman, it also paints a picture of Norman and all the work that he's done as well, and that we've done together as in terms of reconciliation. So really, I think the book brings to life the story of a lot of key Aboriginal people in their voice. And I think that's so important, because as editor of Message Stick at the time, you know, I was able to interview people at the time. And so a lot of the story is in the voice of Aboriginal people, which is so amazing. And I'm actually might just read you two quotes before we go on to Joy and Abraham Tan. And one of these is from Gladys Typin Goompa from Aurukun, when the government was forcibly taking over the Aurukun and Mornington Island communities. And she said, "We speak strongly. If my grandfather was still here, he'd use a spear. We don't want to see another Mapoon. And she said this to the Federal Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, Ian Viner, at the time in 1978. And I've got another quote from Joyce Hall from Weipa, who was on the Land Council, because the Land Council had people from every Aboriginal reserve in North Queensland, from Palm Island up to Bamaga. And Joyce said, Comalco are mining in my tribal land and made it like a desert place. They've made our oysters red with bauxite. Where is our royalty money? The Queensland government get it. Comalco and the Queensland government walked over us like a clean carpet, making us dirty under their boots. So there's, I've got many more powerful statements in there. So I do urge you, if you don't have a copy of the book, to get one. And Bjelke Petersen himself, who was Premier, he had a famous statement about the media, saying it's like feeding chooks, and he wished there wasn't any media because then people wouldn't know anything. Amazing statement. But we're going to pass on now to Pastors Abraham and Joy Tan from Malaysia. And they have their daughter in Cairns, Serene, studying dentistry, and their son in Tasmania, I believe he's studying law, Samuel. So that might be one reason for the question. So on to Pastor Joy, I've asked to speak, but Abraham, you're very welcome to say something as well.
Hi, everyone. Barbara, this is an awesome moment, really. Thank you for your willingness to share your life and your values on the book. It has impacted me. I'm still emotional. And like Irene said earlier, or someone, sorry, that the book just wants us to be a better person. And I want to honor that. First of all, I want to honor the thank you for the writers. Thank you for the names that you mentioned, especially Norman, how he just embraced that heartbeat together with you. So in the book, I appreciate about you bringing up about inequality and racism, which I believe, like Irene said, it's global level. And may this be a seed to every nation like us that really need to see freedom and freedom from injustice, racism, and inequality. I just felt the book helped me to know you so much more, and Norman, and this is valued deeply. And I told Serene, who is in Cairns, our daughter, never one moment take for granted you have Norman and Barbara with you. So I want to say congratulations. I look forward next year to be at the Writers' Festival to celebrate, and if not, buy a plane. I am just so deeply impacted, and a character inside the book that says tenacity and non-justifying for your own self, but I believe God is a God of justice who have moved for you, and I wish you the best. I also pray this book will be translated, especially in my own Malaysia, Bahasa Malaysia language, so that legacy that's left behind, built by our own Aboriginal leaders, can be appreciated. Price that they have paid, it's unspoken. So thank you for revealing both the lies and the truth. It's awesome. It's really awesome. And now this man here will talk about the heart and the meat of the book. He was so impacted as well. We just love you both. Thank you so much. And before that, Greg, this is Samuel. Samuel, can you wave? Samuel is doing law in University of Tasmania, and Australia is a blessed land. Bless all the Australian family and the global family. Samuel, can you wave? This is Greg. He's also, righteous voice. Like you. Yeah, thank you, Greg. Yeah.
There's always this saying that all men are created equal, but we know that's not the case. Reading through the book, chapters continue to review all that the pain that is caused by fellow mankind just for the greed, land grab and everything else and anything else, and discrimination just because of color. So thank you for compiling all these stories, and all this forms a legacy. And all this is amazing. If you look at the time frame, it's in the 1970s to today. All right, within our lifetime, all these stories are happening. A lot of progress has been done today. And thank you, Barbara and Norman as well, for compiling all these stories together, because the stories tells that picture. It's all woven together. It's a beautiful tapestry. And history made us to be who we are today and what we are as a nation today. And it's building upon that foundation. But a lot of people have paid great price for the breakthrough upon breakthrough of what exists today. And there's still much to be done, as what Greg was saying as well. And for Barbara, it's amazing. Thank you for sharing your story so transparently in the book. And to see the beginning as a student activist from a very young age, and forgoing your studies just to follow that passion of that activism, all right, to be that shining light in that period and era of darkness, standing up to government. It's not to the mining company, but to the government, people who will do anything just to bulldoze their way. But you stood there, and today you're still around recording all these stories. The tenacity. I look at my wife and I say, what kind of material is Barbara made of?
Amen.
Norman.
Amen.
In the light of all the government made promises. There's hope, then pam. There's hope, pam. Promises, broken promises, betrayal, this, that. All the stories that's around all that. Yet you kept to that beacon of, kept being that beacon of light,
Voice.
And that voice, and continuing on. And today documenting them to leave a legacy behind.
Yeah.
And continue to promote, all right, what needs to be done. It's amazing. So I salute you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would have, in the first round of battle, I think for myself, if I put myself in your shoe, I would have quit long time ago. And yeah, so it's amazing. Thank you so much for all the great stories. Compiling all the real stories and the heart that comes out from it.
Amen. Bless you.
Thank you so much. And we love the both of you, and we love your heart as well. And we hold you close. And I see that Serene and Samuel are on as well. So bless you, Serene and Samuel. I hope you're enjoying this book launch. And look, thank you so much for what you've shared, Abraham and Joy. And look, a lot of people sort of think, hey, how come I'm still around and I've still got a fire in my belly about these issues? But I do. And, the story has to be told for the next generation and the generations after that. And that would be so wonderful if it was translated into Malaysian, particularly for Indigenous Aboriginal leaders there. That would just be awesome. We'll keep that as a prayer point. Thank you so much. We're going to go. Sorry, go on.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. We love your heart. We're going to move on now to Lillian Schmidt. Lillian's in Sydney, and she's a wonderful prayer leader. She's been reading the book with her husband, Bjorn. Over to Lillian.
Thank you, Pastor Barbara, and thank you, Pastor Norm. What a privilege to be here and share my heart and my testimony. I'm going to read what I wrote because I come originally from Lebanon, and as an immigrant, I did not study the history of Australia. I did study the history of Europe because in Lebanon, we study the history of the Middle East and Europe. So to me, it was fascinating to read because it is a historical book, is a memoir book, is a political book, and it's there is a mixture of every emotions and what you think about the history of the Aborigines. So I will share my heart because Pastor Barbara is also my spiritual advisor, and I'm so privileged to know her and Pastor Noam for the last 9 years. Pastor Barbara is a true leader. She is an amazing author with big heart for justice. I started reading her books to know more about the Australian history and to understand the culture of the Aboriginal people of the land in Australia. God revealed to me and my husband many times in a prophetic way that revival in Australia will be led by Indigenous people. We still believe that God wants to honor his people and especially the Indigenous people of this land. How I felt reading Pastor Barbara's book, Secret and Lies. I felt challenged. I cried. I was overwhelmed with the details of these events. Also from every woman perspective as a woman, I felt deep hurt took me to another place. And I imagined myself sitting under the mango trees with the Indigenous women listening. This is a book that speaks the heart of every Aboriginal people in Australia through the eyes and the heart of a young lady who witnessed the cruelty and the lies of politicians who use their powerful positions to emotionally torture the inhabitants of this land, steal their properties, manipulate their destiny by making decisions without consultation and seeking their approval. They betrayed the trust of the Indigenous people by selling their lands to make money. It is a memoir of a brave woman who, despite all the challenges, was able to commit her life freely to the Indigenous people by sacrificing her life in serving others through her time, her marriage, her motherhood, her expertise, her voice, and her heart. For us intercessors in Australia and prayer leaders, this book is a spiritual mapping book, which take us in the memory of those who suffered persecution, racism, discrimination, and inequality. A battle between black and white, between good and evil, a battle between past and the future, exposing the evil plan in this land and allowing us readers to pray by asking God to do the cleansing, asking God to forgive us from the way we have treated our Aboriginal brothers and sisters. It is a story of how the Aboriginal people fought hard and they still fighting, and they continue to fight despite the pain, the suffering, the maltreatment, how they were used. But our God is a merciful God who is raising them up to lead and to speak. As Pastor Barbara said, this book gives many key Aboriginal people a voice and reveals the shocking truths of the hidden history since 1975 in a near novel-like manner. The political activism examples are not those of keyboard warriors, but those of a people who took to the trenches. I stand today with Pastor Barbara, and I congratulate her on her courageous act for social justice in writing full detailed memoir and events to bring the truth out and reveal the hidden agendas of those who thought they are smart. The Indigenous people in this story are real life heroes, and Barbara is one of them. She is the voice, like John the Baptist, crying in the desert, promising us that there is a new day and then the kingdom of God is nearby. Her book gives us hope and a new window to the future, a new culture that we are eager to learn and understand more. It is God's heart to show us that history cannot be removed, but stays in the memory of our nation, and we should teach it to our children. It is a great history book that should be taught at schools and universities. For every person who wants to see God's will be done in this land as it is in heaven should read this book. Thank you, Pastor Barbara. Thank you, Pastor Noam, for all the work that you are doing. And we love you. And my husband say hello to you, but he's sick today. He couldn't join us. We love you dearly, and keep going and continue to write more books and tell the story that many, many generations to come will read and be inspired. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Lillian, and we love you so much. You've just been a huge support, and so good to be so close friends. And I do want to thank Norman as well, because I wouldn't have been able to do the book without Norman, without his huge support, giving me the time to write and supporting me in so many ways. In fact, he was the one who got me to do the book launch today, saying I better hurry up and get it done. So we're over now to David Jack. And David, as I mentioned before, you know, we've journeyed with David and Carol for so many years now. And David took some really old photographs which weren't very good and got them up to scratch for my books, and did some of my covers, the Yarrabah one and the Quiros one. So very grateful for his support in so many ways. So over to you, David.
Well, thank you, Barbara, Norman, and all the speakers that have gone before me just in the last few little moments. It's just been a beautiful time of honouring you two. Your ministry is one of honouring. Both of you are just powerful in that. You pick up people along the way, and it's just a beautiful thing to have seen for the last 15 years, Carol and I, or 16 years, since Uluru, when you had a conference out there, and that was something prophetically important to us, as we needed to be there. And I brought my video camera, and you might say the rest is history. But and the recording of history and the chronicling of those times has been so important, especially that next year in 2006 in Cairns at the showground, having what, 1,500 to 2,000 people. And there I am standing up on a podium, the only camera in the room, and this all being videoed and the DVDs being copied off immediately. It was just an amazing time. And that was the All Pacific Prayer Assembly and the Bethany Gate thing. Just amazing times. So look, we just are so privileged that we do see you as a one, as you've just shared, Barbara, of Norman's assisting and encouraging of you to bring this thing out today is a wonderful thing. We can't meet physically, but this is not a bad proxy, I think, in many ways. So I just think that this is, everyone's become a videographer now. Everyone can record this. This is being recorded. And I think that's terrific. You know, I held a rare position, you might say. Back then, even at Uluru, I think I ended up producing 13 1.5-hour sessions and all post-produced. We then very quickly got on to recording these as the sessions occurred, just straight to DVD and then duplicated. So no editing, it got out there. You bought a copying machine and off we went from there. But the other key part of this that others have brought out is to do with the William Cooper story. And Barbara introduced me to that in 2010. She said, can you be at Federation Square on the 6th of December in 2010? There's a group walking from Williamstown to the city, which is about 5 miles, 10 kilometres or something like that. And December can be hot. And William Cooper did that walk in his 70s on a hot day. We know it was a hot day back in 1938 when he did that in a suit, because that's what you wore. And he did that to Collins Street and to the German consulate and presented this document, which was not accepted. But he had the street smarts, you might say, to have rung the media or talked to the media, and they both turned up, the Age and the Argus newspapers, to record that moment. And that's what the Jewish people in Yad Vashem, it's now noted there, and he's got a plaque there in his honour, and in the Forest of the Martyrs, and at Yatir Forest, as a contributor to the being a stander-upper for the Jewish people. And that's what we learned from William Cooper, is his standing upness. And I think that that's what Barbara and Norman have done. They've stood up for not just, well, I'd say it was for justice, and that's a big part that's come through today. And I think that justice is just about basic human rights. It's nothing to do with black or white. But it happened to be in Australia, in effect, being a stander-upper for the outcast, the downtrodden and the oppressed. And there's something biblical in this proportions of that description. I think it's, and of course, that's an anchor for Norman and Barbara, is the biblical sense. And others have equated William Cooper to being perhaps a Moses, of leading his people across the Murray River up at Rumballara, Yarrabah, no, not Yarrabah, the community up there, Cummeragunya. Leading them across the river is a bit like leading the Jewish population back then in Moses' time across the Jordan. And so there's a parallel, and we think that William Cooper got that story, and being a Christian man himself and being brought up in that way, which was just remarkable. But so Norman and Barbara, and bringing that book out on William Cooper, and then she did it again and then again. And I think this book represents number 10 or 11 in Barbara's Lexium, I think we might call it, of books, our library. Some 400 pages, 22 chapters. And as she said earlier, about some of the photos were awful. And I thought, what shoebox have you kept this in the rain? It's just, this is dreadful. But, so many hours on photoshopping to clean things up and, putting eyes back in faces and all sorts of different things to make them presentable. And that's been my privilege, is to be part of a facilitatory sort of position of recording the videos that are needed in a chronicling of these events, but also to bring out these stories on William Cooper, especially early on. There's some of the first books, and I was able to do the cover there and bring one of Norman's paintings into that cover artwork, and then superimpose the William Cooper photo over the top of that. But so bringing these things to light through the photography, the recordings, the covers, banners, various other things that we've been able to do together through the years. And I just think it's such a privilege to be working with this amazing couple through these days. And I think it's the symposiums, I think the 2006 one in Sydney, which was about ship-shaping the nation and doing a reverse landing of the Rainbow Warrior, bringing Norman and his grandmother, I think, was there on that day, and his mother coming ashore and being welcomed by the white man, was just such an amazing equalising, if you like, or reversing of that piece of Australia's history of the first fleet coming ashore, and before that Cook coming ashore, and before that others coming ashore, the Dutch especially up in Arnhem Land there, or up in Cape York. His name escapes me. Barbara, you'll remember him, up on Cape York, up near
Marpoon.
Marpoon, yeah, up there. Anyway, that was amazing. Amazing. That was the first massacre in Australia, was what you might say a reverse one. The Indigenous driving off the white invader at that point, which was just amazing. So I just think, I just want to say this has been an amazing to be part of this publishing series as well through these many years, and to say that this is 50 years of your ministry, Barbara, of fighting these battles. This is a warfare, and a spiritual warfare that you've been fighting for 50 years with the pen. And that's another thing we learned from William Cooper. There was no payback, no spears. It was all, his battles were fought with a pen, in petitions and that sort of thing that he was able to. Yes, and standing on the Domain, and certainly at near Federation Square in Melbourne on a soapbox on Sunday afternoons, then walking home to Williamstown and picking up pieces of wood so they could light a fire when they got home. They didn't even have the electricity on in the home that they had in Footscray. Just amazing. The backstory to that house is that there was a Christian real estate agent who I think probably just gave them that house to rent, and there was 3 others in that area. Footscray. Amazing story, and so we want to just thank you both. That Carol and I have been able to be tracking with you through these amazing parts of history, and as others have said, to bring the history to light. And it's been an Aboriginal not mantra, but a headline over the last couple of years of bringing history to light and bringing the Aboriginals' story. And I know a lot of that's tragic, and that's represented in this book and with Lex earlier, and it's just amazing to hear all these stories today. This is a very rich time, and we just honour and bless you. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you so very much. And Carol, did you want to say anything before we head off? I want to just see if Tom Rowley is still with us from Panama. He wasn't due to speak, and he was just about to leave, but he may have left already.
No, I just
yes,
wanted
it
to
looks
agree.
like he's left.
Sorry.
Okay.
Go
I
on.
just want to agree with David and just say that we just honour and bless you, and we just are so glad to meet your friends online too, and just to honour them too, and just to enjoy what they had to say. We really appreciate this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. You've just been a huge blessing, Carol, over so many years. We love you and David heaps, and you're part of our family. And so look, I would just like to thank everyone who's come, and there's a just want to thank Judy and Ian and Jane Blakey, and Norman's sister Colleen, and Samuel, and John and Serene. Bless you all for attending, and all of those who've shared today. It's been awesome what you've shared. So thank you so very much. And it's going to be hard to say goodbye, but thank you. And as I said, if you don't have the book already, www.barbara-miller-books.com, and maybe you could get one as a gift for a friend. It's actually only $3.99 as an ebook on Amazon, so it's written in the present tense as if you're actually there. And I've tried to make it near novel-like, even though it's pretty hard-hitting history. So look, thank you, and bless you heaps. Okay.
Can we ask Pastor Norm to bless us before we go? Can we ask Pastor Norm to bless us before we go?
Okay, so Lord, we just bless everyone who is on this Zoom book launch meeting. Shower your blessings down upon them, Lord, we pray. Thank you, Lord. Amen.
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 Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Good afternoon or good morning.
Thank you so much. Thank
Bless
you.
everyone.
Yes.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.